Don't forget, gently put the dirt around. Great job.
Do that one.
Here we go. Pick it up.
Yeah. Gently.
Gently put it in the hole.
Yeah.
Stand it up.
And push that button.
And then push the dirt all around. Oh, are you pointing at the plants? How did I do? Was that a good job?
Nope.
No! Oh, sad. I'll try to do better next time.
Yeah.
Okay. According to my little helper man, I apparently didn't do very well with planting that cabbage. No wonder the head stayed small. Still tasted great, though. In today's video, I want to look through my photos I took nearly every time I visited the garden plot throughout the first year of having this rented garden, and talk about what I've learned over the last year, where I made some enormous mistakes, and how this year might be different. Thanks for joining me. Let's take a look. Here's the plot after day one. Still need to dig up a lot because there are so many of these nagaimo potato things. We planted a few marigolds, a little bit of lettuce, some purple cabbage, or red cabbage, some broccoli. It's looking pretty lonely right now, but once I get it better organized, it'll work out. Yay! I actually learned that what I called nagaimo in that video were Jerusalem artichokes. I'll talk about them more later. Nagaimo are also known as Chinese yams, and the name literally means long tuber or long potato. And that's not what I had here. Anyway, let's get going. You can see the dates for each of the photos in the corner as I go through them, and you'll notice that I went to the garden much more frequently in certain seasons, and almost not at all during other parts of the year. My inconsistency led to some issues, but perhaps this year will go better and provide a bigger harvest for my family. The start date of my contract was April 1st. You can see on April 4th that I got a little excited and put simple sticks between a ton of different crops on that row. The sticks were meant to show me what was planted where, but I was being very lazy and this was not the most well-considered plan. Having a 3-year-old come to the garden where a bunch of sticks are available results in those sticks inevitably getting turned into swords, baseball bats, golf clubs, arrows, and more. You'll also notice that the little spinning plastic bottle, a gift from a neighboring gardener, gets relocated virtually every time he joins me at the garden. This pattern has not changed even today. Anyway, back to those sticks. I totally lost track of what was planted where, plus I planted some seeds too early there, so they didn't survive having been killed by a late frost. Farewell hot pepper seeds grown from dried peppers from the grocery store. I hardly knew thee. So that row got all jumbled up, and I only found out what I planted after the survivors sprouted. Today, I'm going to tell you 9 lessons I learned over the course of my first year renting this garden plot. And the first lesson, lesson number 1, is to keep better planting records. If I do that, I will know what is where, and not have to mark my spots with little sticks in the ground. Just a few days later, here on April 7th, and for a little while thereafter, you'll see that I rode my bike to the garden pretty often. Toward the end of the year, though, I got lazy and drove the car there more regularly. It's only 1.25 kilometers, or about 3/4 of a mile. It's not far. Lesson number 2, ride the bike more for better exercise and to spend more time outside. I came quite consistently throughout April and May. Plants started to grow, woohoo! I often had my little helper who sometimes brought his sand toys to play in the dirt. We became friends with some of the people working the plots near to us. A lot of them were surprised to have a gardening gaijin in their midst, though there is actually one other American in the area who grows almost exclusively spicy peppers. Ah, now in May, The sunflowers I planted shot up. I should have planned where to plant them better. You'll see how preposterously tall these ones grew. I really should have planted them on the north side of the garden. They ended up casting shadows on lots of other plants since they were in the middle. By the way, did you know that not only are sunflower seeds edible, but so are the leaves and the stem? Though they aren't super delicious, but they're edible in a pinch. You can also bake the leaves to make sunflower leaf chips like kale chips. They're fine. Lesson number 3. Plan better. Where I'll plant things, and what I will plant. So I don't make the mistake of putting 10-foot tall sunflowers right in the middle of the garden again. You can see some green around the base of some of the plants, which then turns a nice brown shade later in the next few days as it dries out. This is when a kind gardener in one of the nearby plots taught me about cutting down all the tall grasses that were growing all around just outside of the prepared garden plots. I started using it as mulch around the plants, but due to limited time, I didn't do it early enough. When I finally got more serious about doing it, I had waited too long and the plants had gone to seed. I tried to keep the seeds out by chopping off the tops, but you'll see I didn't do a great job of that, and the grass then planted seeds all over the garden. You'll see the results later. It's disastrous. Lesson number 4. Mulch more deliberately. Mulch keeps the moisture in the soil and tamps down weeds. Unless you do it too late, in which case it plants weeds, and is not much help at all. You can see a bunch of my lettuce plants got crazy tall suddenly. This is called bolting. I, being a novice, was not prepared for this, and it can happen for a bunch of reasons, but it basically means I missed my chance to harvest that lettuce. I waited too long. The lettuce gets really tall, it flowers, and then it makes seeds. I saved a few for this year's little balcony garden, though most of the lettuce that I grew this year is actually from new packets of seeds. By the way, the city that manages this whole community garden also weeds all the space between the gardens periodically. Look at all the tall grasses and how they disappear in my June 9th photo. Then, the night of June 9th, we had our first big windy storm of the season. You can see that on the 10th, all the corn and my bolted lettuce is now slanted. Then we had another storm the next day. And on the 11th, everything was slanted even more. Lesson number 5. Prepare better for weather events. The previous renter of this plot left behind a ton of green poles, which were all bent for small polytunnels. I straightened a bunch of them and used them as stakes for the cucumber poles and later used them to hold up the sunflowers, corn, and tomatoes. I need to set those up earlier this year. In 2020, I didn't have the foresight to set those up properly before the storms hit and knocked everything over. Finally, in mid-June, I got around to removing all the bolted lettuce, except one that I thought I would let go to seed. All the lettuce had become unbearably bitter, so I couldn't eat any of it. Onto the compost pile it went. Watch how quickly the sunflowers, Jerusalem artichokes, and corn start growing here in the early summer. Do you know Jerusalem artichokes? They're a tuber native to North America and, according to the internet, were commonly grown by Native Americans throughout the continent. They also go by a large variety of other names: sunchokes, sunroot, earth apple, and in Japanese they are kikuimo, or chrysanthemum potato, because their flowers are vaguely reminiscent of chrysanthemums. They also have the crude and not entirely undeserved nickname fartichokes. When I first started at this garden, the entire plot was overrun with those tubers, as you saw in the opening video clip. And throughout the entire season, they kept popping up everywhere. It was irritating. But because the previous owner seems to have liked them a lot, I decided to give them a chance and let a small section of them grow. Very similar to the mistake I made with the sunflowers, I didn't realize they'd grow to 10 feet tall or over 3 meters. When I finally dug them up, my family didn't even like them much in the fall. So they wasted a bunch of space in the middle of the garden, and we didn't even need all the ones we got. So I won't be letting them grow again this year. Lesson number 6. Grow what you will eat. It's great to experiment with some things, and I'm glad to try new foods. But if you don't have tons of space, don't waste a lot of it on something you aren't sure you will love. You can see that I spent a long time cleaning up weeds. Look at that pile on the wheelbarrow. The cucumbers are all withered in the back there, and the corn has all been cleared away. Most of the greens are gone, though some basil is hiding there behind the remaining Jerusalem artichokes, along with one or two in the front row. I let a few of the basil plants go to seed, and those are the seeds I'm planting this time around, actually. Around this time, too, we start to see the squash's vines start creeping around. These become a big feature of the garden very quickly. It's funny, though, I didn't actually plant butternut squashes on my own. I found some seedlings sprouting in the garden compost pile and brought them over, figured no one else was using them. They took forever to really get going, but once they were growing, they were prolific and delicious. The leaves, blossoms, and new tendrils are all quite tender and delicious. You can stir-fry them with a bit of garlic and olive oil, salt, pepper. But we ended up with more than 20 butternut squashes, though they were smaller than the ones you might find in a U.S. grocery store. They were great, and I'm glad I took care of them. I saved some seeds, and I've already sprouted them here at home. I'm hoping to put them in the ground once all danger of frost has passed. We use them a lot in pies and sweetbreads, and sometimes just bake them with a bit of cinnamon, sugar, butter. Really good. Lesson number 7. Save money and save seeds. I have kept a ton of seeds from last year's crops, as I've already mentioned a few times, and I'm planting them again this year. Sure, they won't be the fancy, amazing, perfect hybrids anymore, but now they're a little bit more homegrown and should still make fruit and vegetables that I can eat. Seeds, of course, aren't that expensive, but you can garden on a budget by saving seeds each year. You will also notice my zucchinis growing through the late summer here. My 50-yen package of seeds came with a mere 3 seeds in it. 2 of the plants from those seeds died very quickly, so I had a single zucchini plant. And the male and female flowers virtually never were open at the right times for fertilization, so I got 1 zucchini out of that package of seeds. It stunk. So, now I know. Plant more zucchini. Lesson number 8. Plant the right amount. Not only for zucchini and watermelon to make sure you get proper fertilization, but it's also important to consider how much your family likes or doesn't like a certain thing. I foolishly planted more than 15 cucumbers last summer. We were drowning in cucumbers. I gave dozens and dozens away to neighbors. I made cucumber kimchi, cucumber salads. I put cucumber in sandwiches. I couldn't use it all up. I blended them into my kids' smoothies just to use them and give those kids some vitamins. Too many cucumbers. Anyway, don't plant too much of something that you don't absolutely love, and don't plant too little that you won't get any of the thing you want. Things at the garden kind of slow down from here, so conversely, let's speed up the slides. Here you can see I planted a few random winter vegetables, some of which I ate and some of which ended up getting composted because no one else in the family loved them, and I couldn't eat 20 daikon radishes all by myself. I did learn one more thing. Lesson number 9. Learn more about what you plant. I planted hakusai, which is Chinese cabbage, and I put it in the winter, and then when they got big enough, I harvested all 4. This was a terrible idea. I should have only picked them one at a time. I turned one into kimchi, and a little of that is actually still remaining in my fridge. I'm the only one who eats it. I see other gardens in the community plot, though, that still have several of these cabbage heads in their garden, even though they planted them around the same time I did, and now it's months later. I was used to working with lettuce and bok choy, which bolt relatively quickly, and I still haven't seen a single bolted hokusai. So instead of taking all 4 of these huge heads of cabbage home and struggling to figure out what to do with them all at once, I could have easily spread the harvest out. Fortunately, they also keep pretty well outside, on the porch in the colder months, and in the fridge when the weather starts to warm. But I still have wasted a bit more Chinese cabbage than I would have liked. Another thing I would have known had I learned about what I was planting is that broccoli does way better in the colder months than in the hot months. You saw me grow some stick broccoli there toward the end. That broccoli did great, and I only had to squash about 5 caterpillars to keep them safe. The broccoli I did in the spring, however, was infested with caterpillars the entire time. I'm trying to do my garden on as tight a budget as possible, and with as little chemical help as I can. So I did not apply any pesticides for the entire year. Now that I know a bit more about what pests bother which crops, I will be a bit better prepared for 2021's main growing season. And throughout this video, I didn't mention everything I planted and grew, so if you're curious or have any questions, leave me a comment. I'll be happy to answer either there or in a future video. Now go grow some food. Happy planting!